Frank Gaffney joins me now, the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. Frank, good to have you back on the program.
It's always great to be with you, Lars. Thank you.
Before we talk about Iran, did you get a chance to watch some of this session that the president had with both allies and critics from the Congress today?
You know, I did not, Lars. I've been trying to track some of the reporting on it, but that's about as far as I've gotten.
I mean, because it was about DACA. It was about getting rid of chain migration. It was about getting rid of or bringing in E-Verify and getting rid of the visa lottery, all of those subjects. And, of course, some of the Democrats kept pushing, saying, we want a clean DACA bill that only deals with DACA. And the president just was steadfast, saying, no, we're going to have a deal that includes DACA and all those other issues in one single bill. And I was really impressed by it, and I think it provided some pushback. I was telling the audience a little earlier, is providing some pushback to the idea that this is a president whose family and top aides think is beside himself or crazy or mentally unfit.
Well, so they say. There's a book out to that effect, that's for sure. And look, Lars, I think what we're seeing is the measure of the man finally appearing to be living up to the advanced billing. I mean, if he is in fact the master of the art of the deal, we're going to see it in this transactional undertaking that's underway now. DACA is, of course, just one of the myriad moving parts. In fact, immigration is just one of the myriad moving parts in it. But it's incredibly salutary to have somebody do what he said he's going to do and to hang tough in the face of opposition to it and skullduggery and the various tricks that congressional types engage in. I watched Ronald Reagan do it on occasion, and we've got a need for more of this kind of thing right now.
Well, I'm with you. I think that he really is he's the master of the art of the deal, and you could see that today because he was playing off a whole room of people, some of whom really intensely don't like him, and others, of course, who have been sort of grudgingly brought into the fold because some of them are conservatives who didn't really want to buddy up with President Trump, but they understand that he's the guy in charge. Hey, before we run out of time, I want to get to a couple of big issues. One is the question of sanctions and Iran and where we stand on that matter when it comes to backing up those young people in the streets who are protesting for some kind of reform in that country.
Well, this is the moment of truth, Lars. Within the next 2 days, the president is going to have to decide whether he is going to do what he has done to date and what began under his predecessor, which is to waive sanctions that had been imposed by the Congress and thereby facilitate the propping up of the Iranian regime that is the nemesis not only of the people in the streets of Iran at the moment, but of ours. Or is he going to stand with those people? And he's done so rhetorically so far. I think he's been tweeting and otherwise communicating the right sorts of messaging. But this is the moment of truth. And I think it will be unmistakable, unfortunately, if he decides he's going to continue this waiver business and he's going to try to fix the Obama bomb deal, as I call it. It will not be well received by the people of Iran, and it will be considered just further evidence that the United States is going to be played further by the Iranian regime. It must not be allowed to happen, and I hope the president won't go there.
I mean, Frank, in this case, I would hope that President Trump would take a look at this and say, number one, he likes being a contrarian. This allows him to be a contrarian. Number two, Obama went the opposite direction. He essentially ignored the people who were protesting in the streets in Tehran, and the protests went away, and the mad mullahs had control again. This president could do something completely different and achieve a different kind of outcome. Can you think of anything that would cause this president to say, oh, I'm just going to let this one go and focus on other matters?
I can't see a good reason for doing it. Could he be prevailed upon by some of the people around him, like H.R. McMaster, his national security advisor, to do that? I'm afraid the answer to that may be yes, because that's what we've seen so far. The really frightening thing here is, Lars, that we are watching this so-called deal with Iran on nuclear weapons completely, manifest itself as the fraud that it is. And so to do it in this circumstance, and especially in a way that is such an affront to our interests, as well as aligning ourselves with, I think, the people who want a change in Iran, which is very much in our interest, would be a terrible mistake. He's probably getting that counsel. I think he's been somewhat susceptible to it in the past. I pray that it won't be the case in this instance. I'm
talking to Frank Gaffney, the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. Frank, I know that the late night comics just love the little debate about whose nuclear button was bigger and that sort of thing. But behind all of that, the back and forth between President Trump and the leader of North Korea, the crazy man, is there a more serious question about the say the efficacy and the modernity of nuclear deterrent forces there and here?
Well, it's an amazing fact, but the North Koreans have a more modern arsenal than we do. I don't know about the sizes of their launch, command equipment, but it's a smaller one to be sure. But it's been more recently tested, and it is certainly more modern. Ours, Lars, this is a dirty little secret, but we have been living off of the investment in a nuclear deterrent force since I was in the Pentagon under President Reagan. That's 30-odd years ago. Now, there are things that have been done to try to, make sure they still work. But we haven't tested them realistically in underground tests since 1992. And I think there are increasingly serious questions about the efficacy of the deterrent. And it's a time when we cannot afford to do otherwise than present that as a formidable force to not just the North Koreans, by the way, or for that matter, the Iranians, but the Russians and Chinese as well. So it's going to take some serious upgrading, and I pray the president will get on with that. He's supposed to get a nuclear posture review shortly, and I hope it will inform him and inspire him to take rapid action to rectify what's really the, increasing obsolescence of our nuclear deterrent forces.
I mean, because, Frank, literally, some of these weapons were built decades ago. And has there been much of anything done recently to upgrade the electronics and other things that tend to degrade over time?
I don't think so with respect to the nuclear weapons themselves, Lars. I mean, there's been some of that just where they've, been, frankly, becoming a cropper. But this is the problem, is if you start pulling things out of them without testing whether they actually work when you put them all back together again, especially with new components that weren't designed into them in the first place, you're taking a huge risk. And a friend of mine once told me that he used to run something called the nuclear test site for us back in the day when we had one. Yeah. And he had a bright young scientist, and he said, I hate experimentation. It interferes with my calculations. That's not what you want. You're a nuclear scientist.
No.
For sure.
Frank Gaffney is the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. Frank, thank you very much.